Hello everyone, this video is going to be about the new features in the latest release of Embroideryware. So let's get started. The first thing I want to show you is it's been requested that we have some defaults um, ability to set for the different objects that you might draw. So here we have the defaults that you can set, and it's under the options menu, defaults, and each of the different graphic objects are categorized like they are in the normal graphic browser, and only the items that really make sense to set defaults are enabled. So we have cut work, fill, image, lettering, miscellaneous, which is where the locked stitches are, object, and satin, and stitches. So most of you probably will want to set the length of your stitches for what you normally like using. It defaults to 30. 20 might make more sense for most things. And also, if you want to default things to a certain um, type of satin things, like if you want manual always, which is basically a column stitch, you can set all those things. So anyway, you can set all these things as you want. The second thing I want to talk to you about is the colors. Now, there's not really much to the colors menu right now. The only thing that's in here is really the canvas color, where some other programs have a background other than white. If you set it to default, it defaults to what's typical in some other programs. So it's kind of like a paper color. It's a little tan colored, at least on here it is. And then this thing, 3D shadow color. Right now, it's normally set to 20% of the actual color of the object. So if you set it to 100%, there won't be any shadows whatsoever. So you might want to set this to something more like 50%. But the default is 20. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is a few new things in the zoom menu. Right now, the zoom, let's draw something on the screen so I can show you what the zoom looks like. Right now, the zoom used to be when you typed a number in here, it would change instantly. Now it only changes when you hit the enter button. So it changes back to 100. Then we have these two quick zooms. We have 600 and 100. Typically, the punchers of the past always did a pantograph image at 600%. You can read about that on the internet. The history of digitizing. There used to be a person who would have a pattern that was 600% of the real thing, and then they would actually digitize using a pantograph every single stitch. But anyway, so typically in the industry, 600 is a good value to be looking at your stitches at, and 100 is just 100%. Now, talking about 100%, one of the things you might want to do, 100% ideally is supposed to be sized to 100% of the object on your screen. So this triangle here should be this size on my screen to real life. But if it's not, we have a new feature under the hoop menu called Calibrate Screen Size. And all you need to do is get your handy dandy ruler, either millimeters or inches, and then basically this window says resize this window until your ruler matches. So if my ruler's longer, I could take this window and size it out to my ruler. So you just hold up the ruler to the screen where the left side is attached to here, and then you just resize the screen until the ruler is the right size. Okay, so once you hit OK, then it's going to resize the screen so that basically it matches exactly the ruler size. So 100% would be exactly calibrated to your ruler. Okay, this next section will be about talking about the new feature of the quick menu. So under the quick menu, we have new quick options. These basically get you to the stitch types with some default settings that you would want right off the bat. So we have satin, we have manual satin, which you can move the endpoints. We got fill underlay, fill stop, top stitches, which you've seen in previous programs. We have lettering. When you do the lettering, it's going to go ahead and build a list of the letters that you have installed on your system. And you get the letters from the store, or if you bought the versions with already some lettering installed, you would get your letters listed here. So draw is basically the ABCs of all the different letters. So let's say we're going to choose Brussels. We're going to just type in lettering and hit OK. Now we have that instantly changed into letters. So that's much faster. I mean, it's not like you couldn't do this before. It's just that this is much faster. So we're going to go ahead and just show you nice things you can do with lettering. Lettering is just another embroidery file type for any kind of graphic you have. So in this case, let's say we're going to add some curves to this. I'm just going to go ahead and add a curve using the add a curve menu. Oh, actually add two. Don't really want to. I'm going to go ahead and delete the graphic objects before the curve. Now we have a lettering that we can go ahead and we can edit the points and make the lettering follow the line however you want it to do that. So in this case, the graphic, the lines and curves you draw, will define the path that the lettering goes on. Now, let's say we wanted to change that into a stitch pattern. Again, the stitch patterns that are loaded on your machine or on your particular thing. Here's a fun stitch pattern I just did recently of a fish. It's kind of fun. So we have a fish. The stitch pattern I made the other night. So your stitch patterns are here listed in this menu, so we can change them quite fast by just doing it this way. That's a quilting pattern. Got rope. But I've done some, I don't know, I guess you could call those tulips, but they're not really that great. Then I have some stars, which I like the stars. So anyway, so you got the quick, so for example, and I think, I'm not sure all you know, but basically graphics, lines and curves can be any kind of embroidery object you want. So if we want to change this back to running stitch, there, we just changed it to running stitch. Now each object has all the information built into it. So, not that you would do this, but if you want to change it back to stitch pattern, it can be a stitch pattern again. Now, I didn't really explain that well. I mean, the quick menu is obviously going to change it to stitch pattern, open that window. But if we go ahead and change the patterns here, you can change it to a triple stitch. And then if we change it back to lettering, the lettering is still there because all those variables that you set in the object browser are for every graphic. Another thing that a lot of you had questions about was when you draw some things in the graphic browser. I'm just going to draw a couple things that we can distinguish. Triangle will be next. Some of you said, well, why does when I click this here and I draw again something, it ends up going in, not at the end of the list, but right after that object. So a new feature I've added is if you want to put something before this object, you just hit the top and you can put, I'm going to put another circle, but the circle ends up being before that object because I hit the top to go before. If I hit here, the next object will be right after where I clicked. So that becomes very important when you're doing something where you're trying to do design. So if I was going to do, let's say, a circle design, and I was going to do another circle, and then I put a smiley face, and let's say, okay, and I made these all satins, let's say, and I wanted to basically put an eyeball in right after this first one. I could click that, put my eyeball in, and you notice that that goes right to the next step. The same goes for here, where I want another eyeball. And you notice that it goes to the next step. So which graphic you click will be, the graphic will be drawn after that. So basically, if I click the top, it's being drawn off after the top, which is essentially before for the first item. So if I want to get back to just normal, where I'm digitizing, items one after another at the end, and they just keep on going. The next item I would like to discuss is some of the new stretch options that are available. So the stretch options are part of the quick boxes. So if we turn the quick boxes on, and we select one, let's say, you notice that the quick boxes now have an S with a 1, 2, 3, and 4. The 1, 2, and 3, and 4 indicate that if you press the 1 key, 2 key, or 3 key, or 4 key while you're using the stretch box, it does different things. So I actually, in the tablet menu, since there is no way to use a keyboard, there's a little keyboard here, I turn the 1 key on, as you can see there. So now we're in the horizontal stretch mode. So now you can change a circle into an oval. The 2 key basically stretches it up and down. Allows you to stretch it up and down. The 3 key skews it. So you notice that this is being skewed. Now, it's not really a good example to show you the skew. Let me draw you roughly a square, and you will see what a skew does. So if we do the square, you see the skew skews the direction in the horizontal with the 3 key, and with the 4 key, it skews it in the vertical direction. So you can distort things in neat ways with that. And then for the tablet menu, if you just click the key back, it turns it back off. All right. We already talked about the lettering under the quick menu. If we go to lettering and we go to lettering file name, we get a similar screen to what we had before, but in here we have a few other features. We have rebuild list, which basically will rebuild the graphics in this menu here. Sometimes you want to do that if you are deleting some lettering files and moving them around and things. Rebuild list will just rebuild the whole list. And the same applies to stitch patterns. When you go ahead and you do a stitch pattern, which stitch patterns are something that you probably will use more often because you actually can go ahead and make your own stitch patterns. And so you can see that once you make your own stitch patterns, it's going to detect that you actually created a stitch pattern and saved it. And so the list will be rebuilt automatically. So let's just say I had a quick stitch pattern of squigglies like that, just to use as an example. So I have my stitch pattern of squigglies drawn. I go up to Edit, Copy Stitches, which would just copy the base stitches down, and then I'm going to go ahead and paste stitches to stitch pattern file, and I'm just going to give it a name. Let's call it demo. Alright, so now when we go back and we go ahead and pick the other stitch pattern, and we want to change the stitch pattern, you notice the list is rebuilding again because I've added that one called demo, which should be down here in the list. Right there it is. So I click that, and we can see it's almost like a heartbeat sort of thing. And the list is still rebuilding, so we'll let it finish. Some of the stitch patterns are kind of complicated, so some of them take longer than others. Okay. So it looks like the patterns are done. So we're going to just do squigglies, and we have something that looks sort of like a heartbeat that we created as a stitch pattern. Another new feature that I would like to discuss is now we have outputs for new file types. We have the traditional DST. We have DST plus EDR, which is a color file for those programs that can actually take colors for DSTs. We have PES and PEC. EXP Plus for Bernina, which also has an additional file in addition to the EXP, so that you get colors on your Bernina. And then Melco, which is just another, it's basically without the color file. So those are the different sport types we have for embroidery. What's important to know is that DST basically is industrial format, so it has really no limitations on distance. So you can make embroideries, 20 inches long if you wanted, if you had such a machine to do that. PES files are based on PES 1 standard, so basically they can only do 130 to 180, so 130 millimeters wide by 180 millimeters tall. But the nice thing about PES files is they have color information, so the colors you choose in here will be maintained when you open the file on your machine. And the EXP Plus format for the Bernina does the same thing. So those are some of the new formats we have. The next thing I'd like to talk to you about is the ordering dialog. So we have some graphics drawn. Alright, so we're going to just go ahead and fill all these and change the colors so that we can use them as the example. So we have blue, green, red, and gray. So we have a new function here called order graphic. So basically what it does is it tells you to select an object. Wait, let's turn this on. It's going to say click the anchor object to order the rest after. So let's say I wanted to have red be first. Then I could do gray, green, blue. When I click it again, the order changes. So that's a new feature. Another new feature that we have is under the Show Hide menu, we have a thing called Graphic IDs. And what Graphic IDs do now is it gives you the IDs on the screen and what each of these graphics is. So you can see that 1 is this one, 2 is that one. Another option that we added to this is when you're drawing curve, you'll notice that when we go ahead and we used to have tangent lines there for just the point that you're clicked. Now the tangent lines are on everything. So we turn the control point tangents on. When I actually do modify this, you notice that now the tangent lines are shown for all the objects. It didn't used to be this way. It was this way for a little bit in one of the versions, and then I changed it so that it was only around the point you're clicking. And I found that I like to have the tangents displayed for everything, because then you can kind of see what goes with what. And if it's too busy and you don't want to see them, you can just turn them off under the Show Hide menu. And then they'll be gone.